I never thought I would get lost in the woods. It was supposed to be a fun hike with my friends. The sun was shining, and the air was fresh. We laughed and talked as we walked through the tall trees. But then, somehow, I took a wrong turn. I looked around and realized I was alone. My friends were nowhere to be seen. Panic started to set in, so I called out their names, but there was no answer. The woods suddenly felt big and scary. Every rustle of leaves made me jump. I tried to retrace my steps, but everything looked the same. Trees, bushes, and more trees. My heart pounded in my chest. I knew I had to stay calm. I remembered reading that if you get lost, you should stay in one place. So, I sat on a rock and tried to think. I looked around and saw a path I hadn't noticed before. Maybe it would lead me back to my friends. I decided to follow the path. As I walked, I noticed the sun was getting lower. Shadows stretched across the ground, making the forest look even more mysterious. I walked for what felt like hours. My legs were tired, and I was starting to get hungry. Just when I thought I couldn't walk any longer, I saw something in the distance. It looked like a small building. Hope filled my heart. Maybe there was someone there who could help me. I hurried towards it, my feet moving faster with every step. As I got closer, I saw it was an old shed. It looked abandoned, with broken windows and a door hanging off its hinges. But it was a place to rest and maybe find some help. I walked up to the shed and peeked inside. It was empty except for some old tools and a dusty chair. I decided to sit down and rest. My legs were aching, and I needed to gather my thoughts. As I sat there, I heard a noise outside. It was a soft rustling sound, like something moving through the trees. My heart started to race again. Was it my friends, or was it something else? I stood up and looked out the broken window. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, I saw it. A large, dark figure moving through the trees. It was big, much bigger than any person I had ever seen. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't believe my eyes. The figure moved slowly, almost gracefully. It was covered in dark hair from head to toe. I realized I was looking at a Sasquatch. I had heard stories about them, but I never thought they were real. Yet, here it was, right in front of me. I didn't move. I was afraid it would see me. I watched as it walked through the trees, stopping now and then to look around. It didn't seem to notice me. I felt a mix of fear and wonder. I wanted to get a closer look, but I was too scared to move. The Sasquatch stopped near a tree and looked around. Its eyes were dark and seemed to take in everything. It was only about 50 feet away from the shed. I could see its large hands and feet, and the way its muscles moved under its fur. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. I watched as it picked up some berries from a bush and ate them. It moved slowly, almost carefully, as if it didn't want to disturb anything. I was amazed at how gentle it seemed. All the stories I had heard made Sasquatch sound scary, but this one didn't seem that way. After a while, the Sasquatch started to move away. It walked deeper into the woods, and soon it was out of sight. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. My heart was still pounding, but I felt a little less scared. Seeing the Sasquatch was amazing, but I still needed to find my friends. I decided to stay in the shed for a while longer. Maybe the Sasquatch would come back, or maybe I would hear my friends calling for me. I sat down again and tried to relax. I thought about the Sasquatch and how different it was from what I had imagined. As the sun started to set, I knew I couldn't stay in the shed all night. I needed to find my friends or find a way out of the woods. I stood up and looked around one last time. I didn't see the Sasquatch, but I felt a strange sense of peace. Somehow I knew I would be okay. I started walking back down the path, hoping it would lead me to safety. As I walked, I kept thinking about the Sasquatch. I felt lucky to have seen it, even if it was from afar. It was a moment I would never forget. Just when I thought I was lost again, I heard voices. My heart leaped with joy. I called out, and soon my friends appeared through the trees. They looked worried but relieved to see me. We hugged, and I told them what had happened. When I told them about the Sasquatch, they were amazed. Some of them didn't believe me, but I knew what I had seen. It was real, and it was something I would always remember. We made our way out of the woods together, and I felt grateful to be safe with my friends. But I also felt grateful for the strange and wonderful encounter with the Sasquatch. It was a reminder that the world is full of mysteries, and sometimes getting lost can lead to the most amazing discoveries. It was a cool, crisp evening as I walked down the familiar path through the woods, my loyal dog Wilbur trotting happily beside me. The sun had just set, leaving a soft orange glow in the sky. This was our favorite time of day, when the world was quiet and calm. Wilbur, a golden retriever with a shiny coat and a wagging tail, loved these walks as much as I did. We walked deeper into the woods, the tall trees casting long shadows on the ground. The air was filled with the sounds of rustling leaves and chirping crickets. Wilbur sniffed around, exploring every nook and cranny with his curious nose. I smiled, enjoying the peacefulness of the moment. Suddenly, Wilbur stopped in his tracks, his ears perked up, and he let out a low growl. I followed his gaze and saw something that made my heart skip a beat. Standing a few yards away, partially hidden by the trees, was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was tall, much taller than any human, with a body covered in thick, dark fur. Its face was a strange mix of human and dog, with sharp, pointed ears, a long snout, and glowing yellow eyes. For a moment, I stood frozen in place, unsure of what to do. The creature stared back at us, its eyes locked onto mine. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Wilbur growled again, louder this time, and took a step forward as if to protect me. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "It's okay, Wilbur," I whispered, patting his head to reassure him. I didn't want to provoke the creature, whatever it was. Slowly, I began to back away, keeping my eyes on the strange figure. Wilbur stayed by my side, his growls turning into anxious whimpers. As we retreated, the creature began to move. It stepped out from behind the trees, revealing its full form. It stood on two legs, like a human, but its movements were more animalistic. Its fur bristled, and its eyes glowed even brighter in the fading light. My mind raced with questions. What was this thing? Was it dangerous? Wilbur and I continued to back away, keeping a safe distance between us and the creature. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. The creature followed us for a few steps, then stopped. It tilted its head to the side, as if studying us. For a moment, I thought it might attack, but then it turned and disappeared into the trees, moving with surprising speed and grace. I let out a sigh of relief, my body trembling with adrenaline. "Come on, Wilbur," I said, my voice shaking. "Let's get out of here." We quickly made our way back to the main path, Wilbur staying close to my side. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, but when I looked back, there was no sign of the creature. When we finally reached the safety of our home, I locked the door behind us and leaned against it, trying to calm my racing heart. Wilbur sat by my feet, still on high alert. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. I had heard stories of strange creatures in the woods, but I never thought I would see one myself. I spent the rest of the evening thinking about the encounter. What was that creature? Where did it come from? And why was it in the woods near my home? I couldn't find any answers, but one thing was clear. The woods were no longer the peaceful place I once knew. Over the next few days, I tried to go about my normal routine, but I couldn't stop thinking about the creature. Every time I walked Wilbur, I found myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see those glowing yellow eyes watching me. I even considered avoiding the woods altogether, but Wilbur loved our walks too much to give them up. A week later, I decided to visit the local library to see if I could find any information about what I had seen. I searched through books and old newspapers, looking for anything that might explain the strange creature. To my surprise, I found several accounts of people who claimed to have seen similar creatures in the area. They described them as dogmen, half-human, half-dog beings that roamed the woods at night. Some of the stories were old, dating back hundreds of years, while others were more recent. People had reported seeing the dogmen near the same woods where I had my encounter. Some said the creatures were harmless, while others claimed they were dangerous and had attacked livestock or even people. I didn't know what to believe, but I couldn't deny what I had seen with my own eyes. The idea that there might be more of these creatures out there both fascinated and terrified me. I decided to be more cautious on my walks with Wilbur, sticking to well-traveled paths and keeping a close eye on our surroundings. Despite my fears, I never saw the creature again. But the memory of that night stayed with me. Wilbur and I continued our walks, but the woods no longer felt like the safe, familiar place they once were. Instead, they held an air of mystery and wonder, a reminder that we share this world with creatures we can't always explain. And so, our evening walks took on a new meaning. They became not just a time for relaxation and enjoyment, but also a time to reflect on the unknown and the wonders that might be lurking just out of sight. Wilbur and I learned to embrace the mystery, knowing that some questions might never be answered, but that's what makes life so interesting. It was a regular Friday afternoon when I, Tom, a delivery man, was assigned to deliver a package to an office building downtown. The package was small but seemed important, marked with a bright red sticker that read, "Urgent." I had several deliveries left for the day, but I decided to make this one my priority. The office building was tall, with large glass windows that gleamed in the afternoon sun. I parked my van in the almost empty parking lot and grabbed the package. The building seemed quiet, and as I walked towards the entrance, I noticed a sign on the door that said the office was closed for the day. A bit puzzled, I checked the address on the package again to make sure I was at the right place. Everything matched. I tried the door, and to my surprise, it opened. It seemed someone had forgotten to lock it. Stepping inside, I was greeted by the cool air of the air conditioning. The lobby was empty, and the silence was almost eerie. I headed towards the elevators, hoping to find someone on the intended floor to receive the package. The elevator ride was smooth, and I got off at the third floor, where the package was to be delivered. The third floor was just as quiet as the lobby. Desks were neatly arranged, computers were turned off, and not a single person was in sight. I walked past the rows of cubicles, looking for any sign of life. It was strange to see such a bustling office completely deserted. As I moved deeper into the office, I heard a faint noise. It sounded like something scraping against the floor. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but the sound persisted. I followed the noise, my curiosity piqued. The sound led me to a hallway that ended in a small storage room. The door was slightly ajar, and the scraping noise was louder now. I pushed the door open slowly and peeked inside. The room was dimly lit, with shelves lining the walls filled with office supplies. But what caught my eye was something unusual on the floor. It was a pale and thin humanoid creature with long limbs and claws and large black eyes. It moved in a jerky, crawling motion, hence the scraping sound. I watched in amazement as the crawler scuttled across the floor. It seemed to be searching for something, its tiny sensors scanning the room. I had never seen anything like it before. The crawler moved with purpose, weaving in and out of the shelves. It was both fascinating and a bit unsettling to watch. I took a step back, not wanting to startle the creature. It didn't seem dangerous, but I had no idea what it was capable of. The package in my hand suddenly felt heavy, and I remembered my task. I placed the package on a nearby desk, hoping someone would find it when the office reopened. As I turned to leave, the crawler stopped moving. It seemed to sense my presence and turned towards me. Then, as if deciding I was no threat, the crawler resumed its search, ignoring me entirely. I walked back to the elevator, the sound of the crawler fading behind me. The whole experience felt surreal, like something out of a science fiction movie. When I reached the lobby, I glanced back one last time before stepping outside into the afternoon sun. Driving away, I couldn't shake the image of the crawler from my mind. What was it doing there? Who had created it? And what was it searching for? I had so many questions but no answers. The office would be open again on Monday, and I wondered if anyone would notice the crawler or if it would remain a hidden secret, scuttling around in the shadows. The rest of my deliveries went smoothly, but I couldn't stop thinking about the crawler. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the events of the day in my mind. The crawler was like nothing I had ever seen before. The next morning, I woke up early, eager to start my deliveries and perhaps learn more about the mysterious office. As I made my rounds, I kept an eye out for any signs of unusual activity, but everything seemed normal. It wasn't until Monday that I had a chance to return to the office building. I had another package for the same floor. This time, the office was bustling with activity. People were at their desks, phones were ringing, and the sound of typing filled the air. I delivered the package to the receptionist and asked casually if they had found anything unusual over the weekend. The receptionist looked at me with a puzzled expression and said everything had been normal. I didn't mention the crawler, not wanting to sound crazy. As I left the building, I couldn't help but feel a sense of mystery. The crawler was still out there, somewhere in the office, its purpose unknown. My name's Jennifer, and I've been a lover of the wild since I could barely walk. It's in my blood, you might say. My folks were both rangers, so my earliest memories are filled with the sounds and smells of the forest, the feel of dirt under my fingernails, and the sight of the trees all around. I grew up here, in the midst of Yosemite's grandeur. Some kids had playgrounds. I had an entire national park. It was my backyard, my school, and my sanctuary. When life threw curveballs at me, as it does for everyone, I always found my balance among these rocks and trees. So there I was, one day in August of 2018. The sun was bright in the afternoon sky, but heading down behind the towering cliffs. I had my binoculars out. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just watching climbers on El Capitan. It's kind of a ritual for me, watching these little specks of humans take on this massive slab of granite. They look like ants from where I sit, inching their way up, but you can tell it's a battle, a real struggle against the raw power of nature. I must have been watching for hours, the light changing, shadows growing longer, and the climbers making their slow progress. It's meditative in a way, kind of like watching a fish tank, but with more adrenaline. And as the sky turned this brilliant shade of orange, something unusual caught my eye. At first, I thought it was another climber, but this one was moving too fast, too confidently. It didn't have any ropes or gear, nothing. It was just soaring up the rock face, and I couldn't make sense of it. I kept my binoculars glued to this figure, trying to understand what I was seeing. It was covered in fur, kinda like a bear, but not quite. It moved more like a person, but there was no way any person could move like that, not without ropes. It was almost like it was part of the mountain, you know? It climbed with such ease, such grace, that it was almost supernatural. And then, as it reached the summit, it stood there for just a second, silhouetted against the now fading light. I swear, it had the upper body of a man and the lower body of a goat. I'm not saying it was a mythical creature or anything, but in that moment, my mind was racing through every story I'd ever heard, every legend and myth. Then, just like that, it disappeared over the summit. Gone. I was left there staring at the spot where it vanished, feeling this mix of awe and confusion. I didn't know what to think. Was it a new species, something that had evolved to live on these sheer cliffs? Or was it something else, something that wasn't supposed to exist? I continued to look for it for well over an hour, but when it didn't re-emerge, I packed up my stuff and started to head back home. What I had seen was haunting in a way, but also exhilarating. I mean, I thought I'd seen it all during my many years in the park, but this took the cake. I asked around, of course, talked to some of the rangers my parents had worked with and even some of the climbers I knew. Most of them said there was sure to be a logical explanation. But there was this one old climber who had to be in his 70s. He'd been climbing here his whole life, and he looked at me with these keen, sharp eyes when I told him what I saw. He didn't say much, just nodded slowly and mentioned he'd seen some strange things on the cliffs over the years too. Things he couldn't explain. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press him. Somehow, I didn't need to. It was enough to know that the mystery was shared, that I wasn't the only one who'd seen something unexplainable. That night, I lay in my bed with the sound of the wind whispering through the pines. I thought about that creature, about the vast wilderness that stretched out beyond my little world and everything else that might be out there and unknown. I mean, there's so much we don't know, so much that remains hidden in the wild places of the world, and I like it like that. So, was it real? Did I really see what I think I saw? I can't say for sure. But every time I go back to Yosemite, you can be sure that I look up at El Capitan and I wonder what's really out there, beyond where we can see, living in places we can't reach. It's a comforting thought in a way, knowing that there are still mysteries waiting to be discovered, or maybe just to be wondered at, from a safe distance with a pair of binoculars. I was a student in high school. One day, I got into trouble and had to stay in detention class after school. I sat at my desk, staring at the clock, waiting for the minutes to pass. The room was quiet, with only the sound of the teacher writing on the board. Suddenly, I felt a cold breeze even though the windows were closed. My body started to feel heavy, and my mind became foggy. It was like someone else was taking control of me. I couldn't move or speak. My hands started to shake, and my vision blurred. As time went by, things got worse. I could hear whispers in my head, telling me to do bad things. I felt scared and alone. The other students in detention noticed that something was wrong with me, but they were too afraid to come near. After what felt like forever, the teacher finally let us go. I stumbled out of the classroom, feeling exhausted and confused. I didn't know what was happening to me. My parents noticed that I wasn't myself and decided to take me to see a priest. The priest was a kind and gentle man. He listened to my story and nodded with understanding. He told my parents that I was possessed by an evil spirit and that he would help me. He began to pray for me, asking for the spirit to leave my body. As he prayed, I felt a warmth spread through me. The heaviness lifted, and the whispers in my head faded away. I could move again, and I felt like myself for the first time in days. The priest continued to pray until he was sure the spirit was gone. When it was over, I felt lighter and happier. I thanked the priest and hugged my parents. I was so relieved that the nightmare was finally over. From that day on, I was more careful about the choices I made and the people I spent time with. I never wanted to experience something like that again. The experience changed me, and I learned to appreciate the simple things in life. I was grateful for my family, my friends, and the kind priest who had helped me. I realized that even in the darkest times, there is always hope and a way to find light again.